I work at a logistics warehouse about 40 miles from my house. The drive is a straight shot down a 2-lane state highway. Last January, a massive blizzard hit our county. The local news had been warning people to stay indoors all day, but warehouse shifts do not get canceled easily. I was working the late shift in the loading bay. Management finally realized how bad it was getting and decided to close the facility early at around 11 p.m. The snow was already accumulating fast in the parking lot. It took me 10 minutes just to scrape the ice off my windshield. I got into my sedan and turned the heater on high. By the time I merged onto the highway, visibility dropped to 0. I could barely see past the hood of my own car. The wind was howling outside my windows. I kept my speed at 15 miles per hour, just gripping the steering wheel and hoping I would not slide into a ditch. I passed 2 cars that had already spun out into the median. The radio was mostly static, so I just drove in tense silence. I drove like this for an hour. Then I saw a pair of flashing yellow lights ahead of me. It was a large county salt truck. I felt a wave of relief. I sped up slightly to get closer, deciding to use the truck as a guide. If I just stayed behind its taillights, I knew I would stay on the road. We drove together like this for another 30 minutes. The snowfall only grew heavier. Then, without warning, the truck put its right blinker on. It turned off the highway. I hesitated for a second. I figured the main route was impassable up ahead, or maybe the driver knew a shortcut to bypass the drifts, so I followed him. The road we turned onto was completely unpaved. It was bumpy and narrow. Thick pine trees pressed in close on both sides of the vehicle. Heavy snow fell from the branches onto my windshield. I checked my cell phone sitting in the cup holder. There was no signal out here at all. The GPS screen was totally blank. We drove down this dark path for 10 more minutes. I was starting to realize this was not a shortcut back to the main road. Then, the salt truck came to a complete stop. I stopped my car about 20 feet behind it. I kept the engine running and waited for the truck to move. A minute passed, then 2 minutes. I thought about honking, but decided against it. Then the yellow flashing lights shut off. The red tail lights shut off. The truck went completely dark. I kept my headlights on. Through the blowing snow, I watched the driver's side door of the truck open. A man stepped out. He was very large. He was not wearing a winter coat. He walked to the back of the truck and reached into the bed. He pulled out a heavy metal pipe. He gripped it with both hands and turned to face my car. He started walking slowly toward my windshield. I quickly shifted the car into reverse and pressed the gas, but the tires just spun uselessly in the deep snow. I was driving across the state line to visit my parents for a long weekend. The trip usually takes 6 hours if the traffic is light. I left right after I got off work on a Friday. About halfway there, I hit a massive whiteout on the interstate. The forecast had predicted a dusting, but this was a major storm. The snow fell faster than my wipers could clear the glass, and heavy crosswinds pushed my car from side to side. My hands were cramping from gripping the wheel. I checked the dashboard. There were no exits for 20 miles. I had no choice but to pull over onto the shoulder. It was too dangerous to keep moving. I slowly guided the car to the right until I felt the rumble strip and put it in park. I decided to sleep until morning. or at least until the highway plows passed through to clear a lane. I checked my gas gauge. I had over half a tank. I left the engine running to keep the cabin warm. I locked all 4 doors. I reclined the driver's seat as far back as it would go and closed my eyes. I fell asleep to the sound of the wind violently rocking the car. I woke up hours later. The digital clock on my dashboard read 3:14 a.m. The engine was still running and the heater was blowing warm air, but something else woke me up. I sat perfectly still in the dark. I heard a loud crunching sound right outside my window. The snow had stopped falling. The wind had died down completely. The moon was bright enough to see the ground clearly. I heard the crunching sound again. It was slow and deliberate. It sounded like heavy boots walking through packed snow. I looked out the passenger side window. There was a fresh layer of deep snow on the ground. I saw a line of footprints. They started from the dark tree line bordering the highway and led directly up to my car. Whoever made them had walked out of the deep woods. The tracks circled around the front bumper and stopped right next to the passenger door. I stared at the door handle. I could not see anyone through the frosted glass, but I knew they were standing right there. The handle slowly lifted up. It made a loud click as it hit the locked mechanism. The person paused. Someone was standing right outside, trying to open the door in the middle of nowhere. I held my breath. I did not move an inch. Then, a thick, gloved hand wiped the snow off the side glass. A man's face pressed against the window. He was wearing a black ski mask. Only his eyes were visible in the moonlight. He stared down at me for several seconds. He did not say anything. He slowly reached into his heavy jacket and pulled out a heavy metal flashlight. He gripped the heavy end of the casing and began striking the glass as hard as he could. I had an 8-hour drive home after a mandatory work conference. I just wanted to sleep in my own bed. The local news issued a severe winter storm warning for the main highway, stating there were already multi-car pileups stalling traffic for miles. My GPS device suggested a detour through an old mountain pass to avoid the worst of the weather and the deadlocked traffic. It said it would save me 2 hours. I took the detour without thinking twice. It was a mistake. The heavy snow started falling about an hour into the alternate route. The road was entirely unlit. There were no streetlights, no houses, and no signs of life anywhere. The only light came from my high beams reflecting off the falling snow. I was driving under 20 miles per hour. The curves were sharp and dangerous. The pavement was completely covered in black ice. My phone had lost service miles ago. I was completely alone out here. I came around a tight bend in the road. My headlights swept across the asphalt and illuminated a figure standing directly in the middle of my lane. I slammed both feet onto the brakes. The car skidded violently to the right, sliding toward the edge of the guardrail. I finally came to a stop about 10 feet away from the person. I caught my breath and looked through the windshield. It was a tall man. He was standing completely still. The temperature outside was in the single digits, but he wore a plain white t-shirt and dark jeans. He had no coat, no gloves, and no boots. He was standing on the ice in his bare feet. He did not seem to be shivering. He was just staring directly at my windshield. I pressed my palm against the horn. The sound echoed into the trees, but he did not flinch. I honked a second time. Very slowly, he tilted his head to the side. His face was completely blank. He showed absolutely no emotion. Then I saw movement in my peripheral vision. Out of the dense trees on my left, 2 more people stepped onto the road. Out of the trees on my right, a 4th person emerged. They were all wearing normal summer clothing. None of them had winter gear. None of them were shivering. They all turned their heads to look at my car. Without speaking, all 4 of them began walking slowly toward my front bumper. I slammed the shifter into reverse and pushed the gas pedal to the floor. The engine roared, but the tires just spun on the slick ice as the figures reached out and placed their bare hands on my hood.